Podcasting, your voice is in the person's head,
Yeah.
typically listening in your earphones. It is the most intimate form of sort of communication that there is, which is also why, these notions that some of us might have had, like when I started podcasting, I was like, shit, I don't, you have to speak a certain way in radio and
Yeah.
project
Yeah.
yourself and all of that. I don't want to do all that. And then I realized I don't have to, because in radio you have to do that, because you have to project, because you are one speaking to many. Here it's like a personal conversation. And
I wasn't a podcast listener. For me, and the passive word which you mentioned is interesting, because I felt I actually, what made me not listen to podcasts was it was passive. I kind of felt like I would always find something else to do and not listen to it. Whereas now, like, I think it's the medium I consume the most. Like, if someone asks me what is the show you watched recently, I might have one in a month, right? But what podcast have you listened to? I'll have like two in a day. So it's just, I think the flip has happened, because passive consumption actually makes you, kind of doesn't control you, right? It doesn't ask for, like you said, all your attention, and also gives you, in so many ways, it's more immersive in so many ways, and makes you feel smarter,
no,
is
in
how I put
fact,
it.
but that's a great point about being immersive, because I teach this podcasting course, and one of the things I point out is about how radio is different from podcasting. Now you might imagine that they're both audio, right? So what is
Yeah.
radio? What is podcasting? But radio on demand, the same way Netflix is like TV on demand. But
Yeah.
actually, they're fundamentally very different for a couple of reasons. One, because radio has this imperative to go broad, because they're reaching out to a lot of people, especially in India, where FM licenses are so expensive, lowest common denominator, blah blah blah. But even in the rest of the world, even where FM channels have been able to carve out niches, and you have many of them, they can't get too deep. They have to, a certain level of breadth has to be maintained. And just to give you a sense of sort of the distance that the creator has from her audience. Now let's go to the visual mediums. Let's say you're watching a movie on the big screen, right? So there is a certain distance between you and the screen, a few tens of meters. And similarly, there's a distance between the camera and the actors. Now
Yeah.
when you come to television, the distance gets less. The television is just a few feet away from you, and similarly, the shot is likely to be composed in a sitting room or a living room or whatever. Think Friends, think Seinfeld.
Yeah.
When you come to YouTube, when there's content being made for YouTube, you are literally, half an arm's length away from your laptop where you're watching it. And similarly, for content specially made for YouTube, that's the kind of distance you get. Now, if you go to audio, I think of the classic radio instance being you're driving your car, and the radio is playing, and there are four people in the car, and whatever, that's a distance. Podcasting, your voice is in the person's head,
Yeah.
typically listening in your earphones. It is the most intimate form of sort of communication that there is, which is also why, these notions that some of us might have had, like when I started podcasting, I was like, shit, I don't, you have to speak a certain way in radio and
Yeah.
project
Yeah.
yourself and all of that. I don't want to do all that. And then I realized I don't have to, because in radio you have to do that, because you have to project, because you are one speaking to many. Here it's like a personal conversation. And I'm sure you've had the same realization over time as well, that so many
Yeah.
listeners feel such a personal connection with the show and with
They
you.
feel like they know you. They've had conversations with you over this period, is
Yeah,
what they
yeah,
feel. Yeah.
yeah. That's so mind-blowing.
What also I find interesting. So I was listening to Pivot the other day, and Scott Galloway said something interesting. He said that exactly what you're saying. That he's like, if you have someone come up to you and take a selfie, they follow you on Instagram. If someone come up to you and start having a conversation like they've known you for years, it's like they listen to your podcast. Right? It's just that is that they feel like they've been part of this conversation for a long time, and it just starts off like, oh, I've been talking to you forever, which is what I feel when podcasting kind of brings up, and that connection. And so interesting, whenever I speak to someone saying, and they're like, okay, 1 second, the engagement numbers are lower or the numbers are lower on podcasts, I'm like, don't look at it as, oh, comparing video numbers to podcast numbers. Compare it to saying how long are people listening in, and the depth and the repetition of those listeners is actually what makes it such an interesting medium. And they're all kind of coming in to get some value.